my name is PJ Grier, like pajamas. I'm one of the officers of SOAR, which stands for an acronym that stands for Supporting Others as We Rise. So just to give you a quick 2-minute elevator talk of the backstory for this event. SOAR is a employee resource group that is that PCOM, which is the Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine for our outside visitors, was recently, it's in the process of being approved as an official employee resource group for people of the African diaspora. So we began meeting as a group, probably monthly or maybe even bi-weekly last summer with the advent of the shootings of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and the summer of discontent in America for systemic racism, for social justice, for issues around inequity and access to health care. All these issues boiled up over the summer in the middle of a pandemic. So our employees at PCOM were feeling a little bit stressed about what was going on around us. And we felt that we needed a safe space to have these discussions. So fast forward, we wanted to do something in acknowledgement of Black History Month. And my colleague said, we were all talking and we all felt like, well, since we're on lockdown, let's do something based on travel since we can't travel anywhere. So this is how the whole issue around experiences of African-American men, Black expats came to fruition. So that's the story. And I'm going to actually kick it over to my co-moderator and let her introduce herself in a minute. But a few housekeeping issues. This is meant to be informal. So if you have a question, you can either put it in the chat box. As the group gets larger, that's probably the way to do it. If you feel more comfortable with speaking your question, certainly unmute yourself and jump in, and feel free to jump in as we begin this conversation. At the end, I will leave you with, I have some business things I need to take care of at the very end, but I hope this will be an enjoyable experience. I also want to let you guys know that we haven't forgot about the Black women. So we will be doing a segment similar to this in March, which is actually Women's History Month. So so please look out for the flyer around that as we organize that event sometime later in the month of March. So I think I've covered everything at the beginning. I'd like to kick it over to Dr. Deborah Robinson, who I've never met physically, but she feels like my best soul sister right now. But anyway, Deborah, take it from here.
Thank you so much. And it's great to be with everybody. And it's just interesting how networks and people connect. So PJ had posted this on a listserv that he does to medical librarians. And someone at the University of Michigan who I've worked with, and she knows that I'm doing this project looking at entitled We Global, African Americans Living Abroad, forwarded me the email that, PJ wanted to get together a forum looking at experiences of African Americans abroad. I said, great. So I reached out to him. I said, I'm so glad you're interested in this topic. This is my thing. Really excited. If I could be helpful in any way, let me know. So I'm actually a research investigator at the Institute for Social Research at the University of Michigan, and assistant director of Program for Research on Black Americans, PRBA, for international programs, and direct the We Global Research and Education Project. So I'm very grateful to the colleague at the University of Michigan that basically hooked us up. And yes, PJ feels like, my brother that I've known forever. So we just, I had some colleagues and friends, Cuthbert in Denmark, Omar in Kuwait, and Michael in Ghana. And he knew Martin in Fiji. I said, oh, great. We have a kind of global thing going here. And that's just kind of the, intro. And so PJ and I have some questions to the four panelists. And I don't know if, we had briefly their bios up, but, maybe they could, however you
introduce
want to handle,
themselves.
introduce themselves. Just briefly, and then PJ and I have some questions for the panelists.
So start off to my right. It looks like Martin, you're up first in first position. So if you can just say who you are in a few words.
Okay, hello everybody. My name is Martin V. Burroughs Jr. I'm originally from New York, and I've been in Fiji for the past 7 years, and it's been the longest place I have lived outside of the U.S. Let me see. I work at the what is considered the Oceania Sport Information Center. So pretty much I'm a librarian for all the National Olympic Committees throughout the Pacific. And I'm also joint sponsored by the Oceania National Olympic Committees. And I'm headquartered at the University of the South. Previous living abroad experiences, I've lived in Ghana, Kenya, short time in Ethiopia, Senegal. Senegal was my longest. And yeah, that's it. Work primarily in refugee resettlement and also taught English in China.
Thanks, Martin.
So that's me.
Thanks. Telford, I think you're to my right next. I think you might be muted.
Right. Okay. Now. Yeah, you can hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I've was born in New York City, but I grew up in California, mostly in the Central Valley, not in a big city, in a small rural community there near the Sierra Nevada mountains. But then I met my Danish wife in Los Angeles in the 80s. We lived there most of the 80s, then moved to Denmark in 88. So I've been in Denmark for 32 years. And so now I have 2 grown children, but we're not, wife's separated, but 2 grown children. And I've worked in the IT industry for the last, for like 35, almost 40 years, I guess, but I retired a couple of years ago. So I'm retired now. And so that fits in well with all the shutdown and so on and so forth, and Zoom meetings and everything. So.
Thanks, Telford. Dr. Williams, Michael, you're next. Don't forget the mute button.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Michael Williams from Washington, D.C. Grew up there, studied there, went to HBCU, Maryland Eastern Shore, and did graduate work at Notre Dame. So for 15 years, I was a U.S. academic in Africana Studies and Sociology. Last at a women's college in Boston called Simmons College. I was director of Africana Studies and associate prof in sociology. Then in 1994, I moved to Ghana, where I've been for the past 26 plus years. My first 12 years, I was serving as a resident director for a study abroad program. I was that program is called CIEE, Council on International Education Exchange. And then 2006, I formed the IIA Center. And it's also in international education. We organize seminars, workshops, classes, community service projects, internships for student staff who come to Ghana. So I think that's me in a nutshell.
Terrific. Thank you. Omar?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. My name is Omar Lewis. Like 2 of our panelists here, I'm from New York, born and raised. Pretty much it's funny. I'm in Kuwait, and I think about this every day. I been in
I think
Kuwait since right before 9/11, and I've been ever since. Okay. The funny thing was I was married at the time, and we were like, okay, let's give it a try. Let's give it a try, and I'll give maybe a year or two, and 20.
I'm wondering,
Almost
Omar.
21 years later, I'm a teacher, international teacher.
I'm wondering, Omar. Should
Can
you turn your
hear me?
video off because you're stopping? And now I'm hearing the echo through you. I don't know, Dave.
Can you hear me?
Omar, shut your video off and just do your audio because there's feedback, if you don't mind.
Yeah, thanks, Deborah. I was going to suggest the same. I didn't want to talk over you guys, though.
Okay.
Sorry, Omar.
Okay. Can you hear me better now? Can you hear me better now?
Yes. Yeah, you sound clearer. Thank you.
Okay. So, okay, good. Anyway, pretty much what I was saying was that I'm an educator, taught various subjects, but I'm also an athletic director. While I was in New York, I played university basketball. I'm a member of the National Basketball Players Association. Coach, also a 5-star basketball coach. So that was my avenue to go to Kuwait to coach, and they needed a coach and they needed a teacher, and I guess I stayed. So that's really it in a nutshell.
Okay, great, thanks. Well, there you have it, and I guess now we can really just do a dive into questions. So, Deborah, I'm going to defer to you for question number 1, and we'll also be monitoring the chat box as we go along. And for those who have direct questions to a specific panelist, please say so we know who should be answering the question. Or if it's to everyone, that's fine as well.
Okay, I think the panelists actually covered what was going to be my first question in terms of what was the motivation for you to go abroad. And I think, unless you want to say more about that, but to what extent do you think you're going to stay abroad? I mean, many of you have been there quite a long time. So is this it, or do you envision coming back? And I know that that's maybe not an easy question, because some of you didn't envision staying. I hear a thing on Omar's. You didn't envision staying when you went initially that long. So yeah, what's your thinking now? Is this it, or do you envision going back to the U.S.? And I'll mute myself.
Yeah, for me, I'm definitely home. I'm not going anywhere. In fact, I'm a dual citizen now. I'm a citizen of Ghana. I love it. I couldn't imagine living anywhere outside of Africa, and certainly Ghana for that matter. So this is it for me.
As for me, I was supposed to go home. I was supposed to go home last year, May, so I decided to stay because of COVID and the elections. So I'm coming home this May because I got a teenage daughter, and so I want to spend some time with her before she went to college.
Has she been out to visit you?
Not yet. She will.
In regard to me, it's interesting here in Kuwait. You cannot get citizenship unless you marry a Kuwaiti, and the running joke a lot of times is that you're always one, forgive my language, pissed off Arab from being sent back home. So it's I never have any delusions of saying that I will live here forever. I'm blessed to say that I've been here for, for over 20 years. But at the end of the day, I would like the gentleman just mentioned, my daughter, she just graduated college. The COVID issue caused me to stay for the first time in Kuwait the whole summer. And, my daughter and they were here for a long time. They were here 10 years out of 10 years of themselves. But the thing is, it's been almost 2 years since I've actually hugged my daughter, and she, like I said, she just graduated graduated college, and I'm hoping that things can open up, or even with the vaccine issue. Initially I was like, I don't know if I want to take the vaccine, but the fact that I haven't seen my daughter, I'm thinking of very strongly of taking it and just just going to, and dealing with whatever I have to deal with. But, as far as this would, last thing I'd say is that if there was an opportunity to go elsewhere, because I like international teaching, I wouldn't rule that out. But also, even going back to the States, if I had to go back to the States, I would prepare for that also.
Thank you. Cuthbert?
Yeah, I have 2 grown children here, so that's what kind of held me here over the years. If that hadn't been the case, I probably would have left here 25, 30 years ago or something, but so I'm kind of tied here by family, but I've lived here so long that I'm used to it. And I'm also, like somebody else said, I'm a dual citizen now. That just allowed that a few years ago here. And but I miss going back, and we always take my children with me also every year, every summer. We've gone back to California and visited family and things like that. And last year with COVID was the first year since about 2004 that I hadn't been back. And so it was, I hope travel is going to be possible this summer, but it doesn't look good so far. But so it's mainly because of family and things. But I've worked here and worked, and just like probably as I would have worked in the US, I mean, it's an IT job, so it's kind of different than some kind of something like working at a university and instructing students and and a lot of personal contacts, and things. It's more of kind of a nerd kind of job to do instead.
Sure.
So that you can do anywhere.
Yep. Thank you. Omar, I have a follow-up question for you. You mentioned that in Kuwait, in order to become a citizen, you have to actually marry a citizen. Did I understand you correctly?
Yes, and really that is few and far in between, because there's a big dowry thing here in Kuwait. So if I'm married, so suppose I say I'm going to marry a Kuwaiti lady, a Kuwaiti sister, and she, I would have to pay her a dowry. I can't get around that, and some of the money that they're asking for, which is the equivalent of 2 years of college university. So that happens a lot. Now, as far as ladies, they marry a lot of sisters have married Kuwaiti men, taking their last names, and they're enjoying their lives. But it's very, very rare. It's very rare that an American male or any nationality male from another country marries a Kuwaiti here. It's just it's happened, but I can count on my finger how many people I know, how many males I know have done that.
So, as a Black American male, how are you perceived?
Mm-hmm.
How are you perceived?
Okay, that's a very good question. I was waiting for it. Well, here's the thing, and this is the issue. First of all, if you know anything about Kuwait, many of the Kuwaitis look like us. They look, they're so it's not, so the racism is the racism. Well, I get to that. It's more of a classism thing. When they see me, a lot of times they assume that I'm from. They say, "Are you Nigerian? Are you Somali? Are you Sudani?" Obviously, and it's funny because, and those the brothers here that have lived in the continent of Africa, you can I doubt very seriously that I look like a Sudani or we know, but they don't know that. So they tend to sometimes, lump it in that regard. So that's really a lot of times that's what we're dealing with in terms of any issues in terms of, it's a country class issue that sometimes, a lot of times I'm explaining, they say, well, you're American. Well, did you get citizenship? Were you born? I'm like, no, I was born and raised, and it happens. Now the racism per se, unfortunately, a lot of times comes from your colleagues. A lot of the colleagues that went over and came over here and got I'm serious, got a job. They bring that baggage with them at times also. So that's really something that we've dealt with. That's one of the reasons why here we formed the organization, the Brothers and Sisters of Kuwait, because of that because of things like that.
That's great. Well, I got to move on, but we'll get back to you, Omar. This question is for Michael Williams. And it is, what was your hardest adjustment moving to Ghana?
Oh, okay, great. Well, it was easy for me. I'd been traveling to Africa, West Africa, since the late 70s, and moreover, I have so many friends who were from West Africa. So it was fairly easy for me, partly I think because I was so excited about being able to live in Africa. And so I get that question a lot, but it's easy. For me, it was easy for me. It may be different for females, maybe. I think it may be different. Then I was older. I was, late 30s when I came, about 40. Women because of polygyny, I think struggle with that. But I married a Ghanaian woman. We had 2 Ghanaian children, so that has helped me to assimilate and integrate and to understand the culture. So honestly, I love the food. I love the people. It's calm. It's safe. I don't know. Nothing was difficult. I mean, maybe infrastructure, but if you can have enough money, you can get a generator, so you always have electricity. You get a water tank, you always have water. Roads are, not the best, but so I don't really have anything that was difficult. It's been easy for me personally, yeah.
No, PJ, I wanted to ask the others that question as well. So Martin, then Cuthbert and Omar, what was the hardest adjustment moving to the country where you are now, if anything?
I didn't have so much of a problem. It was just getting used to Fiji. I remember, Fiji is going to be littered with resorts. So when you take I took a car ride from Nandy's, where the international airport is, and when you take that to Suva, you see a bunch of country. You see forest / jungle and a bunch of hills and mountains. It's very lush and green here. But you see very much country in the cities. Suva is, it's bigger than my town in New York. I'm from Long Island, but Riverhead. So we might have 60,000 people in the city here. Nah, say 100. But it took me probably a couple of weeks to get used to the food. Food was easy to get used to, but I really didn't have much problems here.
Cuthbert?
would think,
Or
sorry.
Omar?
I would think that one of the things was one of the things that attracted me to Kuwait was the Islamic aspects, because I am Muslim, and so learning, I knew some Arabic. I've been around Arabs, in New York and when I lived in Atlanta. So that adjustment was I kind of knew the people. In fact, I have a good friend that's a Kuwaiti that I pretty much grew up in the States. And one of the things he used to always say to me was, Omar, always remember, you'd be hard pressed. And this is him. He said, I know my people. So I always remember you sometimes would be hard pressed to convince people Kuwaiti that they're wrong about things. So keep that in mind. And I kept that in mind, and I learned, and within weeks, I realized this is what he was actually right. The other adjustment is that I had to be patient to understand that I'm not in New York anymore. I'm not in Atlanta anymore, and that a lot of things that may seem routine and easy, like getting paperwork done, getting certain things that you need, even so much getting like something in the store as pancake syrup, might be a long drawn out process. So it just reminded me to be very patient. Also, to be careful driving here because folks drive like maniacs. But generally, I adjusted pretty well, I like to believe.
Yeah, Cuthbert?
Yeah, I would say when I first came, there's obviously the first challenge is getting a job, and that was not very easy. And so my wife's brother gave a reference to a place, and then I talked to them, and there was actually some English guy that was the department or the leader of that project or something, and then I got a job there. But one of the big challenges initially is learning the language. If you go to another foreign country, the first thing you got to do is you got to learn the language, and that's what I did almost as soon as I got there. And the thing with Danish is that it's closer to English than for example Arabic or some other languages. So it wasn't so bad reading it because you could recognize a lot of the words after a few months, but writing it is more a challenge. And then speaking it is the biggest challenge because they got vowels that don't exist in English, and it's probably closer to German. But the language is a big challenge for a lot of expats, a lot of people coming to other countries of Denmark. Is and the thing is, like, even still today, there is the thing too that the Danish society is kind of insists on that you conform to their rules and to their society. You don't change their society; you conform to their society. So that's also a thing to deal with, and that means that the thing is too, like when we first, my wife, when we were first here, and within the first couple of years, I think we were just walking around the town there, and there's a big apartment complex, and they got paths between the buildings, things like that. For one day, we're walking along there, coming back to our apartment, and some Danish guy comes up and says to her, in Danish, he says, "Are you proud to be Danish?" Because she was walking with me. And so she stopped and said, "No, not particularly." And then he was kind of shocked and stood back. So there were some strange people around, and it's like everywhere, one thing I learned is that people are kind of the same everywhere in a lot of ways. We're all human beings, and they all have the same. Any group of 100 people, you're going to find left-wing people, right-wing people, friendly people, hostile people. Doesn't matter what that 100 group of people, what you assemble them with, you're going to find all these kind of variations in it. And I learned that everywhere you go, it's kind of a lot of the same things, a lot of the same mentalities.
Right.
But the thing is that Denmark also, you know, they drink a lot sometimes, you know, and they have these call it a julefrokost, the Christmas parties. And people drink a lot, and some of them have this beer, wine, but they have all this hard liquor. It's almost like whiskey, you know, and they kind of push you to drink it, you know. Oh, you're not having some? Are you sick or something, you know, or you know? And
Difficult.
it's like they got these social rules that they push people to conform to,
Right.
and then they get drunk and they say some real stupid stuff. And I've been, you know, called the N-word and stuff like that, you know, and
that probably happens in a lot of places where it's drinking.
Yeah.
Why don't we move on?
Okay.
PJ, did you have a question? I see Estelle had a question. If not, should I go with that? Not hearing from PJ, I will say one of the participants had a question. As an American, did you find it difficult to form a new village in your various locations over the years? What would you recommend people do to garner the support necessary to be successful? Kind of two different questions. And is your village Americans, African Americans, or the folks there in that country?
Well, I think it may depend on the individual. In Ghana, there's, as Martin was mentioning in the chat, is an association, AAAG, African American Associations of Ghana, and so that's there if you want to connect with people from your prior village, I guess. But it's easy to, because Ghanaian is a very sociable society, so it's very easy to establish groups. I belong also to a group called the Village, I guess you want to call it, the Ghana Club. And there's a bunch of old timers, my age, some of them much older than I, and we meet periodically and share stories, that kind of thing. So it's fairly easy to do because, you know, Ghanaians are just very sociable. Far as this, so you said this network, depending on your interests, I'm in education, and so I spent some time at with some of the tertiary institutions, and because that's my background, they've been very helpful. I've been attached to one called Webster University, which is a U.S. university in Ghana, and another one, African University College of Communications. I was there. Was also an adjunct at the University of Ghana. So those institutions helped, I think, me to be successful in Ghana. But Ghana is, again, it's easy. Again, it's maybe very personal because, you know, I grew up in DC, and when DC was Chocolate City. And so, what do you call it? Accra reminds me a lot of the DC I grew up in. So it's easy to set up networks and to villages and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, why don't we go Martin, then Omar and Cuthbert, forming this new village, and you know, how can you be successful, or what helps you be successful where you are?
Well, with in Fiji, there's only a few of us African Americans. However, there are Fijians that have African American either great grandparents or grandparents. But most of my friends here are usually Fijian, and I work with some Americans as well at the university. So most of my time networking is usually online. I run a group, African Americans in New Zealand, and then I network with the folks in Australia. So there's a good bunch of us that either live in the islands or in New Zealand or in Australia, as well as some folks who are here locally. But yeah, but compared, I have more local friends than I do American friends.
Let me ask a follow-up, Martin. You were saying a number of the Fijians have African American grandparents or something. What? How did that happen? What's that all about?
You were on a ship with your so-called master, and you decided to stay, or you ran away and found yourself in Fiji.
So, can you hear me? I'm sorry, I must have been disconnected. Can you hear me now? I'm just doing a sound check.
We can hear you. We can
Yeah,
hear
we
you.
can hear you.
Okay, I didn't mean to cut you off, Martin. Continue.
No problem. For example, in rugby, the Fiji team won the gold medal in the Olympics in 2016. Their physiotherapist, Kathy Wong, is a Williams, and her great-grandfather came from the States. He was actually a pretty good entrepreneur, from what I heard.
Okay, I'll follow up with you on that.
Can I jump in for a quick minute with Dr. Williams? You mentioned something when you were talking about blending in Ghana because DC was a chocolate city. So it speaks to the issue of the color of your skin. So my question to you is, and to anyone, when you're in a country and most people look like you, can you explain the feeling, the majority feeling, the feeling that you feel that you're part of the majority? I had that experience once in my life, and it was a completely different experience that I'd never had that experience in the US.
It's incredible. I just love it. It again reminds me of the DC I grew up in. Yeah, you can't even just put it in words sometimes. It's a sense of confidence, sense of self-assuredness, comfort. I don't know how to describe it, but yeah, it's good because when I was in the U.S., I was academic for 15 years, and I taught at some HBCUs, Fisk University, for 4 years, and I enjoyed it, I think, because of that. But when you're in the majority institutions and you're working in a place in the majority, you're always on edge, and what you're going to say and what how it'll be interpreted, and these people always trying stuff, and you always so you don't have that in Ghana, and so you it's less stress. To me, Ghana is less stressful. Race is very stressful, and so when everybody looks the same, I mean, stress sources of stress, but when everybody's is the same, no one is questioning your identity, your integrity, your self-worth, and the feeling that gives, you can't always, at least I can't always put it in words, but I think that's partly why I'm almost always very happy.
Would you say it's Black privilege?
No, it's Black privilege, it's Black normalcy. Everybody is speaking on the same level, and we share that common experience. It's for me. I love it. I couldn't imagine living in another environment where I'm the minority. I couldn't handle that anymore, especially when the majority is so resentful and hateful and
right. So David, let's look at the chat box. David, I lost my chat string because I got disconnected. Is there?
Oh, Deborah's been doing a great job of.
Okay.
Yeah, we have. In fact, we have a number of questions. So let me just say a couple, and then if we could, since a number of questions are coming up, if we could keep the answers.
Can I say something quick?
Sure.
All right. So I'm in Fiji. So Fiji, Vanuatu, New Caledonia, PNG, and Solomon Islands. They're all what they call Melanesian islands. So it's nothing but us kind of here, or people who look like us. So if I put on the Sulu, even if I'm wearing this shirt and I don't say anything, everybody thinks I'm Fijian. So yeah, I get that same as Michael does.
Wow. Yeah, New Caledonia also in that.
Could I answer the question about the your what was it, your group or something, your social
finding your is it difficult to develop to form a new village,
and
how I think you've talked about how you could be successful.
Well, the thing is I saw it when I first came here. I didn't know anybody, and so to me it was mostly just work and people that I knew at work and talked to at work and stuff like that. And that was most of my, I guess if you could call it social contact, with just people at work, and then what they had, you know, some kind of party or something that connected with the work or whatever. Then it was mainly that. But then later on, I began to connect with more Americans living abroad there through the Democrats abroad kind of thing. And then later, then also developed more contacts with other Americans, and then found a lot of other Black Americans living in Denmark, and that there was kind of a group of them there. And that's probably a lot of my social contacts today is with that group.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not real. But as far as the Danish population, I also participate with them to some extent too. And kind of, they have these social groups, the things that are just like large groups you join to go to some event or something like that. You know, it's not so much it's not a small personal group. You know, but I noticed that there aren't many immigrants that are part of that kind of thing, really.
Before, I see Omar wants to get in.
Yeah.
Omar, before you go, let me just ask 2 or 3 quick questions that if people can answer as well. We're going to save the one about, you know, what was happening in the US and the whole stuff last year. We'll save that till a little later. But in addition to what we've already asked, what should a person ask themselves or think about before moving abroad, before deciding to live abroad? And issues of healthcare. How is the healthcare, access to healthcare where you are?
Okay. I'll answer all quickly. Your first question about the village. To be honest, in my 20 years, my first 15 years, there wasn't really much of a village for me, because and really at the time I really didn't care, because my family was here with me, so we did things together. When my family left in 2013, I spent those next 2 years, I really stayed by myself. And, you know, like I mentioned earlier, that some of the racial problems that I dealt with, I dealt with it at my job. And so they would have their gatherings and they would arrange their gatherings, and very rarely if I would get invited to, and I guess to be honest, I just really didn't want to go anyway. But, you know, I had one good friend from Scotland, and he was like, man, Omar, don't you want to go? If he didn't invite me, if he didn't bring me along, I wouldn't go. So it turned out I got sick. I had an operation, and I stayed to myself. But then a year or two later, I got, you know, more and more Black folks started coming to my job, and that opened up a lot of avenues, and we created this group. I got to meet. I'm in a fraternity, so I had fraternity brothers that were living on base that I finally got hooked up with, and then so those things kind of opened up. Now, as far now you said the other, as far as healthcare, the job healthcare can be if your job provides that, you know, you can get, you know, I had an operation that probably would have broke me in the States. So basically that was pretty much it. It was all paid for. What was that? What was your other question before the healthcare? Doctor?
What should people think about if they're thinking about moving abroad, living abroad?
I think, and this is something that I always say, is I think you need to ask, we always need to ask ourselves, what was your motivation? What was your motivation for coming, you know, like when people ask me about Kuwait, I say, okay, what's your motivation for coming to Kuwait? Well, are you trying to make money? Are you trying to, and basically, whatever that motivation was, then focus on that, because you're gonna have your tests and your trials and your tribulations. But if you try to stay focused on what brought you there in the first place, then that will help you. The other thing I would say is that always pay attention to the narrative about you, especially in your work. If you're coming here for work, always pay attention to the narratives. Now with narratives, they can be true, they can be exaggerated, they can be untrue. But basically, if it's a negative narrative, then I would say, if you care enough, try to change that narrative, because a lot of times that narrative can follow you around in your job, at least here in Kuwait, and it really sometimes can be difficult because that's what people run with, that narrative. I'm a teacher, so a lot of times I'm dealing with parents, I'm dealing with Kuwait, I'm dealing with administrators, and sometimes if the narrative can be deserved or can be undeserved. A lot of times it can be undeserved, but what do you do to try to to control that narrative? So remember why you came. What is your motivation? Don't let anybody distract you from that. We have a thing, don't let anybody mess with your dinar. Don't focus on that. Focus on your motivation for being there, and be careful and pay attention to the narratives. I hope I answered that question.
Yeah, and I think if Michael and Martin and Cuthbert talking about the what people need to keep in mind, before they decide to move abroad, and the healthcare.
I'm not. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. For Ghana, I don't know. I just know Ghana. And so with Ghana, I think the main question, I think, is, can you make a living? I've seen so many people come here with the passion of wanting to be here, but without the means of sustaining themselves. Somehow if you had a job and you lose your job, you don't have that social, what do you call it, blanket, or, unemployment insurance and food stamps and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's an important question. Will you be able to sustain yourself? Because I assume you're going to a place where you want to be. So that's an important question for me. How will I sustain myself? And with healthcare, the Ghana healthcare system is not bad. It's improving, actually, as we speak. It's not bad. The costs are a fraction, less than a fraction of what you'd pay in the US, but still, you do need money. There is a national health insurance, but that's for just basic illnesses and all, but which is nice. At least Ghana gets the concept that healthcare is a human right and everybody should have access to it. It's just that because the national revenue is not great, so it just handles basic illnesses. But if you get something more severe, there are wonderful hospitals now that are available. And again, you pay nothing like you would pay in the US, but still you do need money. So I don't have any concern about healthcare because they're great hospitals.
Martin?
I'm not a good person to ask, because I usually just decide to leave and then I just leave, no matter if I have. But as I'm getting older, I got to worry about money a little bit more. So in the islands here, basic healthcare is okay, but if you need treatments or certain specialties, you'd have to go to another country. Even though they have a medical school here in Fiji, the quality of care, if you need emergency, there are people that can help you, but some things, it's best to go abroad.
And let me just add something onto Martin, that one of the colleagues in the We Global, our We Global ambassadors, Tori Rogers, who lives in Bangkok, she had never left the country before. and she decided to just move to Bangkok. And very happy. I mean, I think with social media and Facebook, these various Facebook groups, that facilitated it. But it's just really interesting. She had never left the country before, never traveled abroad, but then decided to move. So people are doing all kinds of things. And, I guess they figure, okay, if it doesn't work out, and, if you don't have family and kids and mortgage and all these other things, you can go, doesn't work out, you could come back. So I just wanted to add that. I think Cuthbert has a very different experience in terms of the health issue in Denmark.
Well, I would say that, no, I think it sounded good in Ghana, actually, and that's good to hear. But you say in Denmark, there's also a public health system. I mean, Bernie Sanders mentioned Denmark in the primaries and stuff, right? But yeah, they do. And well, I mean, Denmark isn't the only country. A lot of European countries have public health systems similar, where you pay it through your taxes. So when you have to go to the doctor, to the hospital, something like that, you got this yellow card, like a credit card, with your name on it and so on, and a swipe stripe on it. And then you just go in there and swipe it through a machine, and that's it. Real simple. I mean, it eliminates so much stress, that you're in the US and you got to go to the doctor, to the hospital. Okay, does your insurance cover you? How long? Oh, how long can you be in the hospital? Is it 1 week or 3 weeks, or how much extra you're going to have to pay? And I mean, and then somebody's sick, lying there in the hospital, and they got to deal with all that kind of crap, But here, they say that it's, in the US, you got high taxes in Denmark or other places, you got to pay all these taxes. Yeah, okay, taxes are higher, but look what it's covering. It's covering all these costs that you're paying yourself out of your own pocket if you got to go to the hospital. So that means it's actually sharing it across everybody, even though Denmark's a small country, only less than 6 million people, right? But so.
And I forgot exactly, but during the COVID, I think it was Denmark that was offering some incredible amount of time off if you got COVID, and covering you and getting like most of your salary or something. I forgot exactly what
that was the thing that they were doing to try and keep businesses operating, is that they were giving the businesses, and also giving them some supplements or whatever, so they could keep paying their employees for a period, while they were shut down. That's what that was about. I think Denmark's not alone in that. The U.S. was also, well, I'm not sure if they were doing that, but they were doing, but not. No, yes, they were. They had a huge COVID packages that they did to help pay out businesses, right?
Yeah, but
they did kind of the same thing.
Well, no, because I think I'd have to look it up, and I don't want to belabor this point, but I think in Denmark, everybody got something, or all the businesses.
No. Well, businesses maybe, but not people directly themselves. That's the difference. Okay. In the U.S., you got a check. I even got a check coming to me. My children got checks in the mail here in Denmark from the U.S. for all that $1,200, and now they're going to get $600 and stuff.
That's wild.
They just send it out to everybody. But I didn't get any money from the Danish government. Okay. But I had a sole proprietor business, but that was closed by that time anyway. I could have maybe. But then you have to apply and show all your. There's a lot of
paperwork, bureaucracy.
Yeah, a lot of bureaucracy in Denmark, and even when they do everything, kind of like once they got some meeting of a group, part of a union group or something, a small group somewhere, then they got to go through all this bureaucracy and how to do all the meeting, all this kind of stuff. But anyway, but another point I would say is that the dental is a different story. You go to the dentist, it's extremely expensive in Denmark, and the government does not cover very much of it. They cover a little bit, like a tiny amount of it, really. But I mean, the dentist can be extremely, extremely expensive. I had to pay something like $3,000 to get a tooth implant.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. So that's the debt, and that's what I remember back in the 70s on there was some comedy show there, Saturday Night Live. The guy was on there talking about, and Europeans are like, what was it? They're nice people, but they something like but they don't have any teeth or something like that. All their teeth are rotten.
Okay, why don't we
Let's
move
move on.
on? Yeah, PJ. Oh, so you're back, PJ. Do you
Yeah.
want to ask the next question?
Well, one question is for anyone. I know that that was one of the issues with my colleagues within our group here, was what's the greatest joy that you have gotten by living abroad? If you can explain it in 1 or 2 sentences, what brought you joy? The greatest joy.
My biggest joy is the fact that, like one of the brothers mentioned about people are the same all over, and my students are that way, that they want to learn, and they can decipher the BS, and they genuinely have a good affection for those who have take an interest in them. So that's my biggest joy, is that I'm still doing what I like to do, is teach and coach.
It's good to have a passion. Anybody else?
Well, for me, it's I just feel safe, respected. What I've said before: safe, respected, free. Yeah, no hindrances. That's my greatest joy. Yeah, I think. Yeah.
Should I talk? Okay, just say that briefly, that probably just my family, my children and things. That's probably been my biggest joy living here, I guess. But that's not would have happened anywhere I lived. But also, I think there's a lot of cultural things that you can do here too in Denmark. They got a lot of museums, big art museums. They got film institutes, where you can go and have a new film there every day, and you can see, past films, silent films. See a lot of American films. They even had a film festival that went on for 2 weeks with films from Nigeria. There was the Nollywood Film Festival they had a few years back, and they had these Nollywood directors coming to the institute there and giving talks about what they were doing and their stuff. And I talked to some of them and things, and I asked the guy that was one of the fathers of the film industry in Nigeria. I asked him once, was talking to him there. He said, "Well, what do you think is the cure for corruption? Just in general, not Nigeria, but just in general. We're talking about politics." And he says, "It's in the heart." And I said, "That guy's a genius. That's the whole thing. He's right."
So we're moving into our last 30 minutes, and there's a couple items I really wanted to touch upon. One was the Black identity, and Omar started with that. I'd like to rejoin that question. And David, are there any questions in the chat box that
yeah, let me jump in also.
Emergent? And Deborah, I want to also give you some time to talk about the whole African diaspora and what your research context is with studying or researching expats abroad, and what impact does that have on society in general. So I wanted to allow some time for that as well.
Okay, we'll save that to the end. But the one key thing that's in the chat box was, given the events, and PJ, you really wanted to talk about this, given the events, the protests, the killings, the continued police brutality in the US, but given the events that came to a head last summer and protests globally, how were you affected by that personally, and what happened in your country around those protests, if anything?
Well, I know here in Kuwait, because everything was on lockdown. We were in the midst of a curfew, a curfew and things were locked down. So there wasn't really a lot of protests. But having said that, there was a lot of people that would voice their opinion, through social media. I'm talking about in Kuwait, the newspapers covered it. The Al Jazeera News covered it. So it was something. It was something that we that was really at the forefront. I know my students, they wanted to, they would ask me a lot of questions, and it was very pleasing to me that a lot of them understood. A lot of them were able to understand some things I had to explain, but a lot of them had to really understand that what happened to the unfortunate action of what happened to George Floyd. George Floyd was I was able to explain to them that George Floyd was just one of the many symptoms that has that has plagued Black America and Black, we all, everybody, I think for many people here in Kuwait, many youngsters, they never even heard of the word systemic racism until before George Floyd, or even before that with Arbery, because we were talking about that before the George Floyd incident. So it enlightened a lot of people. And one kid asked me, and I'll end here. They were like, well, I asked him the question is, how do you end racism? Is it enough? And I asked him, is it enough not to practice racism? And the answer he gave me was pretty much like, sometimes folks practice racism and they don't know that they're practicing it. And this was like a middle school kid telling me this. I said, okay, bingo. So these are the things, I think things that at least was happening in Kuwait.
Yeah, and there's some excellent books about that as well. How to be an anti-racist is one book that actually comes to mind. But were your students, Omar? Did they recognize the unique experience of Black Americans globally? I mean, were they aware of slavery? Were they aware of Jim Crow? Were they aware of lynchings?
Here's the thing, and it's pretty much just similar to in the States in that regard, that, you got the gloss over, you got I call it the brochure history, that they'll talk about slavery happened, it ended in 1865, and Emancipation Proclamation of that Lincoln signed and everything, but they don't have it isn't really beyond that. It isn't, so we're trying to do better, which, at least in a lot of times, a lot of the stuff I'm teaching, I'm teaching outside of the classroom here with, through our organization and things like, that we have here. But yeah, it's a work in progress, to be honest, because, it is what it is, and they, even with the stereotypes, left and right are still still going strong. And unfortunately, like I've been going back to this, unfortunately, a lot of those stereotypes and a lot of those miseducation and is really coming from the people the expats that actually come here and bring it with them. Mm-hmm. So that's what we deal with here.
Anybody else?
Sure. In Ghana, the Ghanaians, especially the intelligentsia, were really outraged with George Floyd and all the other atrocities. Mind you, Ghanaians travel a lot, and many Ghanaians have lived in the US, UK, and so it was not really new to them, but it's just reached a whole nother level. And in the case with George Floyd in particular, the Ghanaian government had something akin to a funeral for George Floyd. And and that went out, I think, and got a lot of coverage. So, Ghana, because there's so much poverty, those who are really struggling every day, it's not anything that they're that conscious of. But those who are kind of literate and have been to school, looking at CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, and all, yeah, they're aware of it. People are talking about it, and there've been even some demonstrations. There's been in fact, one guy was arrested because he was organizing a Black Lives Matter kind of protest around Floyd and something else, and they said he didn't have a what do you call it, a permit to have a demonstration or something. So there's been a lot of I think noise about it in Ghana.
Yeah, okay. Are you finished? Okay, go ahead. So I'd say that, yeah, there was a big reaction to it in Denmark because they have a very active Black Lives Matter organization that they've had for, I don't know, I guess about the last 5 years or so now. And there was a big reaction to the George Floyd murder, and they had a number of demonstrations, like in, June, for example, in June 2020, they had a couple. And then the second one had like the police estimated to be 15,000 people in the demonstration, most of them Danish people, but a lot of African people too, and some African-American people as well. And it was Black Lives Matter in Denmark is led by a woman who I believe is from Zimbabwe. And she's a very good motivator and speaker, and and then there was another incident that happened in June 24th, 2020, a few months after the George Floyd, where a young man, about 28 or so, in Bornholm, which is an island, it's part of Denmark off of Sweden, and he was murdered by two white Danish. His father's Danish and his mother was from Tanzania, I think. And one of he had two white friends. One of them had tattoos of swastikas and white power on his arms and stuff like that. But they were childhood friends of his. And apparently their mother had told them that this guy, Philip Bajubi Johansson, had molested their mother, which is kind of hard to believe, but that's what their mother had told them this. I don't know exactly what the details were. Nobody does. And then what they did is they took him out somewhere in a kind of a hut out in the wilderness there on Bornholm on the island, and killed him with the knee on his neck. And so this created another big Black Lives Matter demonstration and things. I've been to most of these demonstrations last year. So there is racism in Denmark, and there are quite a few African people in Denmark. When I take the train, I usually see 3 or 4 African people, riding in the train with me there. And there are some African American people, but probably the biggest group, second largest minority group after the Turks, which are actually Turkish and Kurdish people, are people from Somalia that came in the mid-90s during they had the war there. And so there are quite a few African people. But the thing is that Africa was also, Denmark was also had slavery in the Dansk Vestindien, and the U.S., which they sold in 1917 to the U.S., which became the U.S. Virgin Islands. But they abolished slavery in 1848, 17 years before the U.S. did, and then I think Britain did it in 1835. But the thing is that Denmark kind of denies. They don't talk about it. Well, the thing is, they've never given a formal apology for it, and they've never paid any reparations. And there was a thing back in 1998 which was 150 years after the end of slavery there in Danish West Indies, where the people on the islands wrote a petition asking for a formal apology. No money, just a petition for recognition of the crimes, the inhumanity that had been done. But the Danish government and the Queen refused to do so.
Yeah, probably because it would have implications.
But the thing is also there's a thing in the racism in the sense that the children's books, there's some children's song books. One of them I you know, got in a used book somewhere, somebody just selling them on a market or whatever, you know. And I looked in there and I was shocked and saw this is a book, you know, that's first written in 1948 after World War II. You know, after all the horrors of the Holocaust and all this stuff, and Germany had occupied Denmark. 1948 is a book written with a children's song for small children, and with the N word in the title.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
So
talking about a child, you know, about a child in Africa and his life and how terrible it is, and then it ends in a positive note saying, "Yes, but have sympathy for your African brother."
Well, but then remember, the Africans folks in South Africa came from
Scandinavia.
Scandinavia, and Denmark.
They came. Well, no, they came from Holland. They're Dutch.
Oh, Dutch. Sorry, you're
Not
right.
Danish,
You're right.
Dutch.
Maybe did Martin want to answer about?
I just say quickly before that song was later removed. Was first removed in 1993 with the edition that came out then, because somebody wrote an article to a newspaper complaining about it, and then the publisher noticed it and then took it out.
So within the Fijian context, you have folks who migrate to the States as well as Australia and New Zealand, and they're quite familiar with what goes on. And also you had blackbirding. And then if you look into history, you have a lot of Southern migrants here after the Civil War. And blackbirding was essentially slavery, where they took folks from like the Solomon Islands, Vanuatu, and other places, even some places in Polynesia, and worked them on farms in Australia and New Zealand. And then even in Fiji and other islands as well. Mm-hmm. But yeah, people are aware of that.
Yeah. Okay, so it's 15 minutes after 1. Deborah, I wanted you to say something because part of the focus was Black expatriates. Is this is this the continuing of the African migration or of the African diaspora? And I was hoping that you could at least shed some light on what your research is telling you.
Well, I could speak a little bit to it, but Mr. PJ didn't tell me he was going to ask me this.
Just a sentence or two. Because I'm going to drop your website in the chat box.
Okay, and I put it up earlier, but yeah. So first, we're trying to do this study of African Americans living abroad globally. Historically, people have done research on African Americans in Ghana, especially African Americans in Paris, but no one's looked globally. And I do know why, because it's very hard. It's very hard to get people to do online surveys. But I think what we're witnessing, maybe in the past 7-8 years especially, is just a proliferation, an expansion of African Americans in so many countries. It's not limited to certain key countries that we know about from the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, the historical relationship of African Americans to Ghana and Tanzania, and then South Africa. We are global. We are many countries. So first, if you know any African Americans currently living abroad, please share this link, aalivingabroad.org, and have them do the survey. So I think it's very important to document and get the stories in addition to the quantitative online survey. I really want to start doing oral histories with some of the people you've seen today and others so that they could tell their story. I think it's so important for young African Americans to know, hey, I could go to Fiji, I could go to Ghana, I don't have to be in the United States. There's a whole world and there's a whole history and legacy of African Americans who are in these places and making contributions. So in addition to getting stories and information through the survey, I'm working with African American libraries and museums to try to incorporate, for Black History Month, let's say. A lot of times it's about civil rights, slavery, whatever. First, there's a push to really try to get more information about, okay, what are African Americans in the US doing currently to include in terms of African American history. But then I am dedicated to really talk about the contributions that African Americans have made historically abroad, historically and currently, the kinds of things African Americans are doing abroad. So that's kind of what I'm into and what this We Global project is about.
So thank you, Deborah. And actually a question came in from Janice. Are you also collecting data from people who have lived abroad and returned to the US?
You know, we hadn't, but I am really considering that, especially some of the oral histories. And I'm sorry, a very good friend of mine who died suddenly 2 weeks ago, he had lived in like a number of countries and what I call the serial expat. So I think those stories are important. But one, there's no list of African Americans abroad. So that's what is challenging for this study. Similarly, there's no list of folks who've been abroad and come back, but I know there are many thousands more who have. So Janice, if you fit into that category, I'm gonna put my email in the text.
Yeah, I'm going to put everybody's email. If people want to communicate, I'm not sure how the panelists feel. I have your emails. I can drop them in the chat box if that's okay with the panelists. And Deborah, I'll put yours in there as well.
Okay.
Be sure to but full disclosure, so I'm actually, and Deborah and I discussed this, I'm actually a vacation expat. So she hasn't gotten to this category yet of tracking. So I have a condo in Mexico that one day, when I do retire, hopefully I'll be down there at least 6 or 7 months a year. But I think just living abroad in another culture in general only enriches you as a person. It makes you more of a global citizen as opposed to just an American citizen. Oh, there's another comment. One of the things that slows down African Americans is the concept of maximizing their culture, at least ethnically. Do you see this as a problem? Ben, jump in. Is that for Dr. Robinson or is that for the panelists? You can unmic your.
That was,
yeah.
Hi, that was for anybody who wanted to pick it up and run with it. I was just something that came across my mind as I was thinking, because
Could you say a little bit more about that?
Could you explain a little bit more?
Well, as I've traveled, every place I've gone, Poland, Netherlands, Spain, Greece, Barcelona, you know, any place that you go, just think about it. Turkey, any place that you go, the people seem to maximize their culture. If you go to Israel, the Jewish people, but African Americans, when they go abroad, they single out, they become who they are, they go after what they want, but they don't maximize their culture. We don't start opening soul food restaurants, per se. Just to give you an example, no car washes, no laundry mats, right? We don't do things like that. Other groups of people tend to maximize their culture.
But I would say that I know a number of examples I think in Ghana, but definitely in Paris and other places where people have opened soul food restaurants, and a lot of people are opening businesses. I swear in Ghana, it seems everybody has a side hustle doing something, all the African Americans that I met. And so what's interesting is that abroad, there are a lot of examples of people who have opened businesses, some not African American businesses, but so there's this business side, but some that are specifically are about our culture.
It sounds like, Ben, you're talking about entrepreneurship.
That's basically what it is, because what happens is we end up fitting into the culture more or less instead of pronouncing our culture as African American.
Hello. I think one of the things is that we got to understand. Well, I know here in Kuwait, we have people, brothers and sisters that are doing, are trying to put together their businesses and things that they can do and bring in, cultural related stuff. We have a Jamaican.
Hey, Omar. Omar, excuse me 1 second, please. Because people are leaving the conference, and I wanted to put something. I wanted to put this a survey link for the folks that are still here. Could you at least take a minute to complete the survey and submit it, and so that way it'll help us with more programming like this. Thank you. Go ahead, Omar.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So the thing is that these things are. I mean, there are things being done in here in Kuwait, but now here's the other issue: is that in Kuwait, I cannot set up a business unless I get a Kuwaiti to go in, go halfsies with me. I can't do it on my own. Now there are other neighboring places like the Emirates. There are people that have set up businesses. Like, I mean, Dubai, right next to us, there's a spot called Ting Airi, which is a Jamaican restaurant. And it's solely owned and operated by Jamaican Americans, so it can happen. So really a lot of times we're at you got to check out, you have to see what what is allowed, what are the laws, what are the regulations that they because would allow us to do it here. But we do it within reason. And the other thing I would say is that we take our culture wherever we go in the world. We take our, I mean, if this, I'm not, I always tell folks I'm unapologetically Black, and I'm going to take that wherever I go. So this is, like I said, we try to do things within reason, but we also know that we're at the mercy per se of the regulations here in Kuwait. Now I can't speak for the other panel, but at least here, this is what we do.
So the messages, do your homework.
Exactly. Excuse me?
I said the messages, do your homework.
Exactly. Do your homework.
Okay.
There is a African-American guy that did some soul food or breakfast restaurants for a while, Orlando. I'll say that there's also some some Ethiopian restaurants that are really, really good in Copenhagen too. And so well, I say just real quick here, what I see is the biggest racist problem in Denmark and probably throughout Europe is against Muslims. And there are also African Muslims, right, in Denmark, but the Muslim attacks on them is just by far really bad. But there's been a lot of African American musicians, especially jazz musicians and musicians today, doing other music too. That came to Copenhagen, a whole long list of them.
I think Martin wanted to get in, and then I think PJ was going to bring it, unfortunately, to a close. Martin, did you want to say something earlier?
It looked like he's frozen, so he might have lost the connection. Omar, before we close, I have a sorority sister on the chat. She wants to know what fraternity you're from.
People telling lies about Omega Psi-Phi, but won't they be surprised to see I'm still online? Roof.
All right, with that, is we appreciate everyone coming together. It's about 1:28. I will, for those of you who have left the meeting, the suggestion was we will email the survey link out to all the attendees because we have everyone's emails. Deborah, would I put your email in the chat box? Is that okay? Put that in there.
Sure. And I think I'm fine with emailing it when you send the link too. Oh, and let's be sure to tell everybody we're going to do this. I think you said earlier, PJ.
Yes.
At the end of March.
Yeah, for Black females is March, same day, because February has 28 days. It'll be Friday, March 26th, the same time. So we'll send out a flyer, and we'll like to weigh in on the female perspective as well.
Hey, PJ, could I add something?
Sure.
Before I got disconnected. With restaurants, there was an article that came out a week or two ago about soul food restaurants in Japan. So folks, there are quite a few entrepreneurs out there in Asia, Africa that are
doing some work. In China too. Someone left a remark. Someone's opened a soul food place in China.
And I put a remark in that this brother I know in China is creating in Shanghai a Black Chamber of Commerce. So it's just some really interesting things going on.
Okay, well, with that, ladies and gents, it's the bewitching hour. It's 1:30, and thank you for joining us today. And have a happy Friday, and have a good Saturday, Martin, over in Fiji.
Thank you.
Right.
And thanks to all of our panelists and all of our participants. This was wonderful.
Thank you. Give it applause. Absolutely.
Bye.